I used to joke that if I ever got a tattoo, it would just be a to-do list. Change the air filter every few months, clean out the water heater once a year, back up the computer files on the first Sunday of the month. I'm an infrastructure guy, literally. My name is Michael Reyes, 36, systems engineer for a biotech campus in San Diego. I make buildings behave, chilled water loops, generator tests, card access. I believe in redundancies. If you treat the small things like they matter, the big things usually keep their promises. I believe that right up until I learned a house can be spotless, the servers can hum, the logs can be green, and your life can still burst into flames because one person decided the rules only apply to the appliances. I met Clara in a grocery store aisle I never shopped, the one with flower buckets sweating onto the tile. A thunderstorm had cracked the sky open over North Park. Tourists were rushing for cover with their straw hats smashed down like helmets, and the store smelled like wet cardboard and peaches. I was buying batteries. She was arranging the sunflowers in her cart like a photographer staging a shot. She looked up, saw me stare too long, and said, "If you tell me those aren't my color, I'll have to reevaluate everything." "They're everyone's color," I said. "It's democratic." She laughed like something in her had just unclenched. She was all warmth and easy movement. Freckles, thrift store, denim jacket, hair tucked into a scarf with faded lemons on it. She told me she worked mornings at a little cafe on El Cajon Boulevard and did music at night. "Like elevator music?" I asked, and she stuck her tongue out at me. "Like knock on wood and hope it turns into rent," she said. I went in the next morning for coffee I didn't need, sat on a stool that wobbled, and watched her fill the place up. She wasn't the kind of beautiful that silences a room. She was the kind that makes the room feel more like itself. I left her a note on a napkin. "What's the soundtrack for Batteries?" and my number. She texted me a playlist link and said, "Start with track 4 if you like sad songs that pretend to be happy." Clara loved the idea that ordinary things could be cinematic if you tilted your head. She called our apartment a set, which used to feel like a charming metaphor. She taped little notes to the inside of cabinets. "You're doing great, sugar!" Next to the canister, "Drinkwater plant" on the pothos I kept forgetting existed. We were the couple everyone said got domestic too fast, but I've never understood why that's a bad thing. What's the point of all the maintenance if you can't build something steady enough to fall asleep in? We got married at Sunset Cliffs with a fog bank eating the horizon. Her mother, Lynette, cried like a person auditioning to be the mother who cries. Her father, Graham Dawson, shook my hand like we were making a deal and asked about my retirement contributions before he said congratulations. My mom hugged Clara the way she hugs new people. She's decided our family. 2 pats, then a squeeze that says, "Don't make me regret this." Clara's music lived under the surface back then, like a light behind a curtain. She wrote at the kitchen table, notebook messier than any engineer could tolerate, humming half melodies into a voice memo app. At first it was open mic nights and Craigslist studio sessions that smelled like carpet cleaner. Then it was a real studio in a Santa Monica back room and a producer with a haircut that said he had opinions about wine. She'd drive up on Sundays, come back late Monday, and fill the car with stories about people with names like themes: Leslie, V, Stee, B, your T, 90, Yai, and CB, Yai, free, Yai, Yai, Yai. I told myself, big dreams require big commutes. She started dressing like she'd borrowed a closet from someone with better lighting. No more band tees. Suddenly she had a blazer with a silk lining printed like constellations, black boots that clicked on her laminate like punctuation, ear cuffs that flashed when she turned her head. "Industry stuff," she said. "Everyone's wearing a bit of theater even when they're not on stage." Her phone stopped living in the charging nest on the counter. It followed her from room to room like a second heart. She changed her lock screen from a photo of us at the Salton Sea to a photo of a neon sign that said, "Nothing is permanent," in lowercase. I told myself it was an artist thing. I told myself artists had different rituals for the same gods the rest of us pray to. My friends split into 2 camps. One said, "I'm proud of her." The other used careful voices and asked me if I was keeping up, man. Derek, my friend since freshman orientation when we both misread a map and ended up in the women's restroom, belongs to the second camp. We were at a taco stand in Barrio Logan when he said, "Do you want me to be supportive or honest?" "Shoot me between the eyes," I said. "There's chatter," he said. "A guy I know from a sound company heard she's been at the Echo with some producer, late, hand on the small of the back kind of late. "It's a bar," I said. "Hands exist." "You're not an idiot," he said. which is both a kindness and a warning, and I changed the subject to the Padres because I didn't like the way the word idiot echoed against the inside of my skull. Little things piled up like receipts you swear you'll categorize later. A rideshare charge at 1048 a.m. from the Roosevelt Hotel to a loft in the Arts District. An Apple Watch ping on the bathroom shelf while she showered. Room 918 again, from someone saved as L. A lipstick shade I'd never seen showing up as a smear on the inside of her jacket collar in a place her mouth couldn't have reached without contortion. When I asked her about L, she rolled her eyes hard enough to make a breeze. Leo, she said. Leo Calder, he's a songwriter, friend. You heard me talk about him. I've heard you talk about a lot of people, I said. Friend covers a lot of terrain. There was a group. Hotel bars are quieter than after parties, and managers have this thing where they think the only conversations worth having need a chandelier overhead. She kissed my cheek. Please don't become one of those guys who hews innuendo in furniture. I tried to be modern. I watched videos about intimacy coordination in performance and read interviews where artists swore they loved their partners more because they were brave enough to let them make art with other bodies. I told myself, jealousy is an old disease with an old cure, trust. Then Trust got up from the kitchen table and walked out of the room. It was a Sunday in July when the door blew off the hinges. Clara said she had a weekend workshop in West Hollywood, carpooling with the girls. I spent the weekend doing the small things that make me feel sane, washed the cars, cleaned the HVAC return grills, ran firmware updates on the home server. On Sunday night, I was scrolling past the news when a public story from a venue's account caught my eye. A velvet green couch in a hallway, gold lamps, a laugh I knew. A man's hand reached into frame towards a woman's waist with a familiarity that looked practiced. The caption, private jam after the set. I'm home late, Clara texted. I put my phone face down on the counter and watched a timer count up from nothing. The next day I called a private investigator because I couldn't stand the idea that I might be poisoning my own well with suspicions that didn't belong to reality. Henderson is the kind of man you only meet when your life has entered a genre you didn't audition for. His office smelled like toner and boredom. He wore a suit the color of an expired parking lot. He listened to my mess like a doctor who'd heard every symptom before and said, 7 days? If I'm wrong, I'll pay you and apologize, I said. If I'm right, I'll need you to make sure I'm not inventing a ghost. He asked for photos, a plate number, an outline of her usual haunts. I wrote down the studio names she'd dropped, the hotel she'd mentioned when she talked about lobby meetings, the private members club in West Hollywood she'd sworn she only went to once because the cocktails were too clean. My hand shook writing the list. Maintenance serves you well until you realize you're drafting a schematic for your own humiliation. Night 1, nothing. Night 2, she left the studio with a group. Broke off with one man. Same man from your story screenshot. Night 3, she's at your place. I don't remember the drive home. I remember the sound of the key in the lock, because later that sound became the trigger that made my shoulders lift like I was bracing for weather. I remember the smell of lemon cleaner because I had scrubbed the counters that morning like a man who believed in rituals. I remember pushing the bedroom door because Henderson's hand was on my shoulder like a seatbelt, and without it, I might have done something that would have turned the rest of my life into a courtroom. Clara was on our bed in black, wrists looped in a silk scarf I recognized because we bought it together on a weekend trip to Ojai when we were young enough to believe little luxuries were armor. 2 men were with her. One was Leo the lion emoji with cheekbones. The other, I didn't know then, but I would learn later, Marcus Vance, a producer with a reputation for discovering raw girls who didn't know they were stars yet. The way they scrambled looked like choreography rehearsal for humiliation. Clara made a sound like she was trying to swallow her own name. It's not, she started, and I laughed. I didn't mean to. It came out of me like a valve failure. Rehearsal? I said. In our bed? My voice sounded like gravel. It was an exercise, she said, like the word had the power to absolve. Henderson pressed me into the hallway with the weight of a man who's done this enough times to know where ruin lives. I told her to be gone by the time I came back. I left so I wouldn't have to watch her pack the life we'd made into a bag that looked like a prop in a bad play. I ended up at Mission Bay staring at water that didn't care who it reflected. Derek came, sat on the bench beside me, and handed me a bottle of something that burned. Do you want me to tell you she's not worth it? He asked. Or do you want me to say nothing and sit here until the sky chooses a color? Choose the second thing, I said, and we watched a paddleboarder fall into the bay and climb back out with a grin like idiot bravery. Clara was in the kitchen when I got home, hair scraped into a knot, face swollen from crying or from an allergy to consequences. She asked for 3 minutes. I gave her 5 because I used to love her and because I wanted to know how she would translate betrayal into art speak. She said acting blurs lines even when you're not acting. She said music requires chemistry, and sometimes chemistry sets the table for stupid. She said Marcus was opening doors and Leo was just touchy, and I didn't understand artist circles. She said, I love you and I hate myself, and don't make this punitive. She used the word purge like she was doing me a favor by moving out. I put her suitcase on the porch. She told me I wanted to control the narrative of who she was. I told her I wanted to control exactly one thing, the list of names on the lease attached to the bed I buy. She told me I had never supported her. I told her I paid most of the bills and all of the attention. She told me I liked her better when she was small. I told her I liked her best when she was honest. She left in the red coat I bought her last winter when she said she was cold, in a way that sounded like an audition. She left the cobalt mug we both loved with the chip on the rim we always angled away from our mouths like a private joke. Here is the part of the story where people want the revenge to be quick, theatrical, and legally dubious. I thought about it. I thought about keys and locks and sugar and gas tanks and the fantasy of being the man in a movie who does one terrible, cathartic thing and then gets to walk into a sunset the law never reaches. I didn't do those things. I did something meaner and cleaner. I told the truth to a man who needed it to protect his own house. Avery Stone runs a boutique label that lives on expensive Instagram posts and intimate showcases in white rooms that smell like money. Avery had been circling Clara for months, telling her she had the thing you can't teach. He was also Marcus's boss and Leo's situation. The triangle looked stable from a distance because triangles always do. Up close, it was a pile of matches stored against a space heater. I emailed Avery and asked for 10 minutes, no drama, off the record. He agreed because powerful people are either vain enough to think they can control any conversation or kind enough to want to try. He turned out to be both. We met in a Santa Monica cafe where the baristas looked like they'd been cast for a show called Baristas. The sea air knitted itself into the room. Avery wore a cardigan so soft it made my fingers itch to be a worse person. I slid a manila envelope across the table like I'd watched too many movies. He didn't touch it at first. He looked at me the way people look at a beeping server rack, already calculating whether the alert was a glitch or a warning. Then he opened it. He went quiet, the way a person goes quiet in a church. He stared at a photo of Clara and Leo in the Roosevelt hallway and blinked slow. He stared at a still of Marcus's hand on Clara's waist in a green room I recognized because the same fake fern is in every green room in Southern California. He stared at a screenshot of the Apple Watch message, room 980 again, and the timestamp that overlapped perfectly with the slot on a calendar he had shared with me to prove he kept his production schedules holy. I thought I was paranoid, he said finally, voice flat. He told me I was controlling. She told me I lacked imagination. I thought I was old-fashioned, I said. Turns out I'm just not a doormat. He exhaled like the photo paper had weight. We have a showcase, he said. It's a fundraiser, big room, people who pay attention. I'm not asking for a spectacle, I said. I'm asking for a fire break. He tapped the stacked square against the table like a man closing a file. You'll get one, he said, not because you asked, because I don't permit rot in my house. He did not make me promises. He did not say sorry. He shook my hand like he was signing a contract with himself. There was still the practical life to handle, lawyers, mediation, the equitable division of a future I had already divided in my head into before and after. My attorney, Wynne, wore loud socks and spoke in a tone that made horrifying words sound like errands. We had no children. We had a condo I could afford to keep if I canceled the backup streaming services and stopped pretending I liked Peloton classes. Clara wanted a piece of the house because wanting is the same as deserving in some people's theology. She floated alimony like a balloon to see if it would cast a pretty shadow. Nguyen slid numbers across the table. We were generous in exchange for clean cuts. The mediator called it adult, like we were brave, when really we were just out of energy. On the Thursday before the showcase, Henderson texted, "She's with Marcus. Video available. You want it?" I stared at the 3 dots in my head while my phone stayed still. I typed, "No, enough is enough. I wanted to sleep in a world where I didn't need another inch of proof to justify breathing." Friday, Charity Showcase Santa Monica, the kind of event where even the posters look expensive. White space, sans serif, a photograph of a hand not holding anything. I almost didn't go, Derek insisted. You don't have to stand in the front, he said. Just make sure the truth doesn't get rebranded. The room was colder than necessary, like they wanted donors to keep their jackets on and their wallets out. Clara looked like a star. There's no reason to lie. She wore a dress the color of an apology and a smile she'd been practicing for months. Leo hovered near the side like a man who believes charisma can retroactively justify behavior. Marcus clocked me from 20 feet away and went pale. He didn't know my face, but he recognized the presence of a problem. Avery took the mic, thanked the donors for supporting music that can bend a bad day back into shape, talked about nurture and discipline and the word integrity in a way that made it sound newly minted. Then he said, "Before we begin, I need to address a mistake." He gestured to the back wall, which was actually a screen pretending not to be. Photos appeared. Not the ones I'd given him. He was too careful to make this about gossip. It was the edges, timestamps, rehearsal schedules, access logs, the sort of metadata nobody thinks about until it's a noose. He didn't say names. He didn't need to. People in that room could read a timeline. You could feel the air tilt. Leo's jaw did that thing men's jaws do when they want to look like they are taking accountability without actually dragging any into the room. Marcus's mouth got small. Clara froze. She had a talent for elasticity, a face that could move from delight to sorrow in a blink because she'd practiced making emotion look like language. In that moment, there was nothing to perform. There was just the awareness that a room could see her and not buy what she was selling. "We make art here," Avery said, voice steady. "We don't make excuses. People who use art as a cover for harming the people who trust them are not welcome." He thanked everyone again in a tone that ended the conversation. The set list changed. Names disappeared. The audience shifted like a school of fish avoiding a shadow. Clara's eyes found mine. For a second, I thought she would walk to me and do the thing she does, pull you into her gravity and make you forget which way the tide is moving. Derek stepped half a step forward, a human breakwater. She pivoted to Avery instead, mouth moving too fast, hands telling a story her words couldn't carry. Avery's reply was brief, and whatever he said made her flinch. She walked out like a person who remembered too late they had left something on the stove. I didn't chase her. The hardest lesson of the last year wasn't that people can lie to you with your own curtains open, it was that you don't have to chase every sound you hear. Sometimes, bravery is refusing the bait. Lynette called the next morning, voice marshmallow soft, to ask if I really wanted to make a scene. She said Clara was devastated. I said I didn't make the scene, I turned on the lights. Graham sent a text later that said, "We're disappointed in how public this became." I typed back, "I'm disappointed in how it became at all." You can skip the legal footnotes. They look the same in every story. Asset lists, signatures, a judge with a tired face rubber stamping the end of a thing that had once felt like the beginning of everything. What matters is the quiet after. For a while, the house sounded too big. I left the bedroom door open to the exact angle I used to hate because I didn't want silence to feel like a decision. I replaced the bed. I donated the blankets that smelled like someone else's perfume. I learned to sleep again by treating sleep like a maintenance task consistent times, a room cool enough to make my body think of caves. Clara tried to become a myth on the internet, vague captions about rising and forgiving myself loudly. Work slowed. Friends who had nodded along to her excuses went quiet because people who live for rooms don't know what to do with hallways. Leo played a residency in a smaller space than he was used to and looked bored when no one asked for a photo. Marcus got a publicist who spun his focus on producing healthy artists, which is the kind of sentence that makes you feel like you're being gaslit by a press release. Avery's label posted about doubling down on values and then made an album with a woman who could sing a song about a grocery list and make you cry. Life moved forward without sending a memo. I went to therapy because if the building of me had experienced a fire, I needed a city inspector to sign off on the repairs. My therapist, a woman named Mina with an office full of slow plants, said, "What are you doing that feels like love to yourself?" And I said, "I replaced the P-trap under the sink because it was smelling." And she said, "Start there." She taught me to stop performing steadiness and start practicing it. Quiet rituals that don't require applause, boundaries that don't require applause, boundaries that don't need a press conference. A weird thing happens when you stop auditioning for your own life. It shows you where the stage ends and the floor begins. I started running again before the sun, and liked the way the city looked like it had been reset overnight by a crew I never saw. I learned to cook a chicken that made my mom say, "Lord, look at you." I repaired a stuck cabinet instead of replacing it. I took a call from a coworker who'd found out his girlfriend was cheating and did not tell him my story. I asked what he needed from the day to make it to evening without breaking anything that should be kept. Months later, I saw Clara across from me on the platform at the expo line. She wore the red coat. She looked like the version of herself I met, a person on the verge of something. She looked at me, and I felt the old gravity, but it passed through me like light through a window. A train arrived. She went east, I went west. That's what closure is when you don't force it. Two trains hitting their schedules. When the dissolution papers came back stamped, I put them on the fridge not to celebrate, but to honor the fact that sometimes you carry something heavy and set it down without ceremony. I kept one thing from the life we threw away, the cobalt mug with the chip. On Sundays, when I call my mom, I hold it at the old angle and let it be what it is. Useful, not perfect, proof that flaws don't disqualify you from doing your job. If you're listening to this for vindication, I won't give it to you. Revenge didn't make me whole. It gave me air. It stopped me arguing with a ghost in the mirror. It turned the lights on in a room where I was tripping over furniture. Someone else kept rearranging and telling me was in my head. I didn't salt the earth behind Clara. She had the matches. She drew the map. I just stopped pretending the fire was mood lighting. So here's what I want to know. Where is your line? If you were me, maintenance man with a soft heart and a loaded dishwasher, do you keep it quiet and hope time tidies the mess? Do you forgive on faith and risk rehearsing the scene until it becomes the only one you know? Or do you do what I did? Let the truth be a clean cut, even if the room sees it and decides to talk. Tell me in the comments. I want to hear where your door is. Hit like if you've ever learned the difference between being brave and being baited. Subscribe if you believe people can leave a burning room without becoming arsonists themselves. Someone out there is practicing a lie in a mirror. They might need your words to find the exit.